A wealthy financial backer of a hospital goes on a tour with the hospital director. As she walks past one of the patient rooms, she can't help but notice a patient masturbating. She is shocked, but the director explains this man suffers from seminitis, a rare medical condition where his testicles fill up too quickly. The woman says, "I suppose it is okay then." Continuing their visit, they now walk past a room where a patient receives oral from a nurse. Shocked again, the woman asks, "And why is this happening in your hospital?" The director calmly responds, "Same condition? The patient just has a better healthcare plan." A bartender is getting ready to close for the night when a robber bursts in and pulls a gun. "This is a stick-up," he yells. "Put all your dough in a bag. Don't shoot," pleads the barkeep. "I'll do whatever you say." The bartender stuffs all the money into a bag and hands it over. The crook snatches it and then puts the gun to the bartender's head and says, "All right, now give me a blowjob." "Anything," cries the bartender. "Just don't shoot." The bartender gets on his knees and starts blowing the guy. After a few minutes, the robber gets so excited, he drops his gun. The bartender picks the gun up off the floor and hands it back to the robber. "Hold the gun, damn it," he says. "One of my friends might walk in." A nun gets into a taxi and the driver suddenly asks, "I am sorry, I have a question for you, but I am afraid it will upset you." The nun responds gently, "My son, I have talked to many people and enlightened so many. I don't think there is anything you can say that will upset me." The driver responds, "Well, I have always had a fantasy of receiving oral from a nun." The nun, initially taken aback, responds, "That is okay, my son, I can help, but you have to promise me that you are single." The driver, excited, responds, Yes, I am single." So the driver pulls over and the nun performs as she promised. When the driver is done and they continue their ride, the driver states, "I'm very sorry, but I have not told you the truth. I'm actually married." After a few seconds of hesitation, the nun responds, "That's okay. I haven't told you the truth either. My name is Freddie, and I'm on my way to a Halloween party." A dwarf was drinking in a bar when a sexy blonde walked up to him and said, "I've always wanted to have sex with a little person." The dwarf replied, "I'm sorry, but I've had women say that before. Then I go home with them, and the husband or boyfriend finds out, and I get beaten up." "It's okay," said the woman. "My husband is working away until next week." So, against his better judgment, he goes back with the woman. They start having amazing sex, when suddenly, the front door opens. "Fuck, it's my husband," she said. "Quick, hang out of the bedroom window. And when he goes for a shower, you can climb in and get away." So the dwarf climbs out of the window and hangs on the ledge by his fingertips. The husband comes in the bedroom, says, "It's cold in here," slams the window shut, and the dwarf plummets to the ground. The woman is distraught and calls an ambulance. A couple of days later, she goes to visit the dwarf in hospital. "How are you?" she asked. "Well, my fingers are broken. I've got 2 broken ankles, a dislocated hip, and severe concussion," he said. "Oh dear," she said. "Still, it could have been much worse." "Much worse?" said the dwarf. "How do you figure that out?" "Well," she said, "you're lucky that I live in a bungalow." A young, newly married couple returned home from their honeymoon, and the wife admitted to her husband that she couldn't cook. So, the first night he comes home from work, his wife says, "I'm sorry, I burned dinner." He says, "That's all right, babe. Let's just make love." The second night, he comes home from work and she says, "I'm sorry, I messed up dinner again." He says, "That's all right. Let's just go to bed." He winks at her and grabs her in his arms. The third night, he comes home to find she's sitting on the radiator. "What are you doing?" he asks. She answers, "I'm just warming up supper." I was doing yard work after the storm this weekend and my wife was about to take a shower. I realized that I couldn't find the rake. I yelled up to my wife, "Where's the rake?" She couldn't hear me and she shouted back, "What?" I pointed to my eye, then I pointed to my knee and made a raking motion. Then my wife wasn't sure and said, "What?" I repeated the gestures, eye, knee, the rake. My wife replied that she understands and signals back. She first points to her eye, next she points to her left breast, then she points to her bum, and finally to her crotch. Well, there is no way in hell I could even come close to that one. Exasperated, I went upstairs and asked her, "What the hell was that?" She replied, "I left it behind the bush." A despondent young woman who had lost her job and her house had decided to commit suicide. She was walking along a bridge across the harbor, getting the nerve to jump in, when a young man saw her. "Don't do it," he called out. He looked at her and realized she was incredibly beautiful. He came closer. "What's wrong?" he asked. The woman told him. "Okay, here's the thing," he said. "I'm a crew member on a ship that leaves for Europe tomorrow morning. How about you come with me on the ship? I'll bring you food and drink." He slid his arm around her. "I keep you happy, you keep me happy," she agreed. After all, there wasn't much else to do. She didn't have family. The man was quite handsome as well. No harm in trying. The next morning, he hid her in one of the lifeboats on the ship with a pillow and a blanket. Every night, he brought her 3 sandwiches and a piece of fruit, and they made love until dawn. One day, about a week after the affair started, the captain was doing his rounds and found her inside one of the lifeboats. "What the hell are you doing here?" She explained what was going on. "I get food and a trip to Europe, and he gets to screw me." "He sure does, sweetheart. This is the ferry from New York." 3 convicts were on the way to prison. They were each allowed to take 1 item with them to help them occupy their time while stuck behind bars. On the bus, one turned to another and said, "So what did you bring?" The second convict pulled out a box of paints and stated that he intended to paint anything he could. He wanted to become the Grandma Moses of jail. Then he asked the first, "What did you bring?" The first convict pulled out a deck of cards and grinned and said, "I brought cards. I can play poker, solitaire and gin, and any number of games." The third convict was sitting quietly aside, grinning to himself. The other 2 took notice and asked, "Why are you so smug? What did you bring?" The guy pulled out a box of tampons and smiled. "I brought these." The other 2 were puzzled and asked, "What can you do with those?" He grinned and pointed to the box and said, "Well, according to the box, I can go horseback riding, swimming, roller skating." My friends, if you want to watch other funny jokes, subscribe to the channel.